She was only 6 years old when she called out to the millionaire, begging him to believe her. "Daddy, Mommy is alive." He thought it was a child's fantasy, until one phone call, one hospital, and one pale face on a bed turned his entire world upside down. But was it really a miracle return, or the beginning of a truth darker than he ever imagined? Before we begin this heart-touching story, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? I love knowing where my amazing viewers are tuning in from. Lucas Carter sat in his skyscraper office, the city lights flickering against the glass walls like ghosts reminding him of what he had lost. The silence was deafening, broken only by the scratching of his pen over another soulless contract. To the world, Lucas was ruthless, brilliant, untouchable. But inside, he was hollow, a man haunted by the echo of a name he hadn't spoken in years, Naomi. For 6 years, he convinced himself she was gone forever. He buried her in his work, in money, in the empire he built from stone and steel. He pretended her absence was survivable. He lied to himself that the ache in his chest was just the cost of moving forward. But no deal, no signature, no skyscraper had ever filled that emptiness. He thought he had mastered silence. Until the phone rang. A sound so simple, so ordinary, yet it pierced him like a blade. Lucas froze, pen hovering mid-air. The call wasn't scheduled, his secretary never allowed interruptions. No client dared call this line without warning. His hand trembled as he picked up the receiver. "Carter," he said, his voice cold, practiced, controlled. But the voice that answered shattered that control in a heartbeat. "Daddy!" It was soft, trembling, filled with fear and innocence. His breath caught. Lily, his daughter. 7 years old, too young to carry the weight her voice carried now. Lucas leaned forward, pressing the phone tighter against his ear. "Lily? Sweetheart, what's wrong? Why are you calling me here?" There was silence, broken only by her shaky breathing. Then words that made the world tilt beneath him spilled out. "Daddy, I found Mom." The pen slipped from his fingers, clattering across the desk like thunder in the quiet. His throat tightened, choking on disbelief. "What did you say?" he whispered, almost afraid to breathe. "I found Mom," Lily repeated, her voice breaking like glass. "She's alive." Alive. The WWGs, or detonated inside him. A word he hadn't allowed himself to imagine in 6 years. A word that ripped open wounds he had stitched with steel. But before he could process it, Lily's voice quivered again. "But she won't wake up." Lucas's heart slammed against his ribs. The room spun. Papers scattered as his shaking hand pushed them aside. Alive, but unresponsive. Hope and despair tangled together like chains around his chest. "Lily, where are you? Tell me exactly where." His voice cracked, more desperate than he ever remembered sounding. But on the other end, his daughter's breath hitched, her fear leaking through the line. "I don't know. It's dark. I'm scared." Lucas's pulse roared in his ears. He had never hated himself more, for letting distance grow, for not being there to protect her, for burying his grief instead of facing it. "Listen to me, Lily," he said, his voice trembling yet fierce. "You're not alone. Daddy's coming. Just tell me anything you can see." A pause. Then her whisper. "She looks like she's sleeping, but she won't open her eyes." Lucas's chest caved, memories flooding of Naomi's smile, her laughter, her stubborn fire. He thought he had lost it all forever. And now, could it be real? Or was his daughter clinging to shadows? He gripped the phone so hard his knuckles whitened. "Baby, I need you to stay calm. Can you hear me?" "Yes," she breathed. "I'm here. Please come. Hurry." Tears burned his eyes, ones he hadn't shed in years. "Where is she? Where are you?" he demanded again. Static crackled. Her voice faltered. Then, silence. "Lily? Lily!" he shouted into the receiver. But the line had gone dead. Lucas staggered to his feet, panic surging like wildfire. His chair toppled behind him, papers spilling across the polished floor. He didn't care. Nothing mattered but the sound of his daughter's voice. Nothing mattered but the possibility that Naomi was Al. Getsuan. He grabbed his coat with unsteady hands. His reflection in the glass wall caught his eye. A man broken, desperate, terrified. The mask of the CEO had fallen. What remained was only a father, and a husband who had loved too deeply to ever forget. He stormed toward the elevator, his footsteps echoing through the empty hallway. Every second felt like a lifetime wasted. Every unanswered question clawed at his mind. Had Naomi survived all these years? Had someone kept her hidden from him? Or was this nothing but a child's fragile imagination, born from longing and dreams? The elevator doors slid open, swallowing him in a rush of cold air. His heart pounded as he jabbed the button for the ground floor. The numbers ticked down agonizingly slow. He clenched his fists, whispering to himself, "Please, God, not a dream. Not this time." The phone call replayed in his mind on a cruel loop. Naomi alive. Naomi unreachable. Lily afraid. The combination tore him apart. When the elevator doors opened, he burst into the night, the city sprawling beneath him like a maze he was ready to burn down to find them. His driver looked startled as Lucas threw himself into the back seat. "Where to, sir?" the driver asked, wide-eyed. Lucas's jaw tightened. He didn't know. He had no address, only the echo of his daughter's plea. "Just drive," he barked, his voice raw, desperate. The car lurched forward into the storm of city lights. Lucas pressed his forehead against the cold glass of the window. His chest ached with memories he had locked away. Naomi's laughter, her eyes when she held Lily for the first time. The last moment he saw her before she was gone. He clenched his jaw, fighting back a sob. If she was alive, he had to find her. If Lily was right, this was his only chance at redemption. But if she was wrong, if this was nothing but a cruel illusion, he didn't know if he would survive the truth. The city roared outside, indifferent to his agony. Lucas's phone lay silent in his hand, mocking him with its deadline. Every ring he had ignored before suddenly felt like a sin. Now, one call had rewritten his entire existence. And as the car tore through the night, Lucas whispered the only words that still gave him strength. "Hold on, Naomi, I'm coming." His voice cracked, a mixture of love and desperation. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and white, his reflection pale and broken in the window. His empire meant nothing. His pride meant nothing. Only two fragile threads held him together now. His daughter's trembling voice, and the hope that Naomi still breathed somewhere in the shadows. But hope was dangerous. Hope could destroy him all over again. And yet, he clung to it with everything he had left. Because if Naomi truly lived, then maybe, just maybe, so did he. The night swallowed the car, leaving only questions and a heart ready to shatter again. And as Lucas's pulse thundered with equal parts fear and longing, one truth burned brighter than the city lights. He was no longer the cold CEO on a throne of glass. He was a desperate man chasing the ghost of his past, and this chase would either bring him redemption or destroy him forever. Lucas's car sped into the night, chasing a voice, chasing a ghost. Was Lily imagining dreams, or had fate just reopened a door he thought sealed in death? The city lights streaked past in fractured ribbons of gold and white as Lucas Carter gripped the leather seat with trembling hands, his body caught between disbelief and a surge of dread he hadn't felt in years. His knuckles bone white as he clutched the phone tighter to his ear, his voice breaking in a way it hadn't since the night he buried his hopes 6 years ago, demanding with a desperation that betrayed the ruthless image he had built. "Lily, who told you this? Are you sure? Do you know what you're saying?" But his daughter's fragile sobs cut through his panic, her tiny breaths hitching between words. "Daddy, I saw her. I touched her hand. She looks like she's sleeping, but the nurses said she hasn't woken up," and her words burned into his chest like fire, leaving him reeling, searching for logic where none could exist, as the driver stole glances at him in the mirror, sensing the storm that was unraveling the man he had served for years, while Lucas slammed his palm against the divider and barked with raw urgency, "Faster! Don't you dare slow down! Get me there now!" His usual tone of measured power replaced with trembling fury, the streets of the city melting into a blur outside the tinted glass, neon signs and horns fading into insignificance, because inside the car only one thought thudded in his veins louder than the chaos outside. Naomi, the woman he had mourned, the wife he had loved and lost, could be alive, and that possibility ripped apart the walls he had built around his heart, his mind ricocheting through memories. The soft sound of her laughter in their first apartment, the way she held Lily as a newborn with eyes full of promises, the night she vanished and the hole it carved into his soul. And now those moments collided violently with Lily's small voice echoing in his head, shattering the fortress of control he had lived behind, his breathing uneven as he whispered to himself, as if trying to steady a ship caught in a storm, "She can't be. It's not possible. She's gone." Yet the trembling in his hands betrayed the dangerous flicker of hope he couldn't smother, while the driver swerved through traffic, honking furiously, pedestrians blurring into silhouettes, and still Lucas's mind refused to quiet, guilt flooding him for every night he hadn't searched harder, every lie he had told Lily to soothe her questions, every time he had convinced himself moving on was survival, because if Naomi was alive, then his excuses were nothing but cowardice, his empire nothing but dust compared to the weight of the truth, and with every mile closer to the hospital his chest grew tighter, his throat raw from words unspoken, his vision tunneling on the image of a sterile white room where his past might be breathing again, his body leaning forward as though willing the car to fly, when suddenly Lily's voice returned through the phone, softer now but no less piercing. "Daddy, please come. I'm scared. Mommy's cold, but I know it's her. Please don't let her go." And Lucas bit down hard against the pain in his throat, tears burning hot at the edges of his eyes, but refusing to fall, his jaw clenched as he whispered fiercely into the receiver, "Don't leave her side, Lily. Hold her hand. I'm coming." Every word trembling with a mix of fear and resolve, while the city roared around him, a meaningless blur of glass and asphalt as the car hurtled forward like an arrow loosed from the bow of fate, the weight of 6 years of grief and silence pressing into his chest until the hospital's looming silhouette emerged in the distance, sterile and unyielding under the night sky, and the sight of it sent a shiver through him, because he knew whatever waited behind those doors would change his life forever, whether by mercy or by destruction. And as the car screeched to a halt at the curb, Lucas flung open the door before it had fully stopped, his polished shoes hitting the pavement hard, his pulse hammering like war drums as he rushed toward the glowing entrance, breath ragged, hands trembling, heart burning with a hope too fragile to name, his mind screaming with one question louder than all the rest: what if she was truly alive? And with that thought tearing at him, Lucas shoved open the hospital doors, his chest heaving, his eyes searching desperately for the truth, but the sight that met him in the fluorescent-lit lobby froze him where he stood, his breath catching in his throat, every muscle locked in place, because what he saw was not what he had braced himself for. The image in front of Lucas at the hospital entrance is so shocking it stops him cold, forcing him to question if Naomi's return is salvation, or something far darker. The antiseptic stung his nostrils as Lucas stumbled into the sterile room, every step echoing like a hammer inside his chest, and then his eyes locked onto the sight that unstitched him, Lily in her sunshine-yellow dress, her small frame curled against the bed like a guardian angel who refused to move, her trembling fingers clasped around the limp hand of the woman who had haunted his dreams for 6 relentless years, Naomi, the wife he had buried only in memory, now lying before him in a state both miraculous and cruel, her golden hair spilling across the pillow like a halo tarnished by tragedy, her lips pale, her chest rising and falling only because the machines demanded it, their steady hum mocking the silence that had consumed their family for so long. And Lucas felt his knees weaken beneath the weight of the impossible, his breath fracturing as though the air itself betrayed him, his hand lifting on instinct toward her cheek, hovering in the charged space between doubt and hope, too terrified to bridge the gap for fear that touching her might confirm some cruel illusion, while his voice, once an instrument of command that toppled empires, cracked into a whisper stripped bare of pride, "Naomi, is it really you?" And in that moment the dam of his control broke, memories flooding back in brutal clarity, The last morning he kissed her goodbye, the frantic search when she vanished, the sleepless nights with Lily's cries piercing the silence, the day he convinced himself to stop hoping, all colliding with this sight that rewrote everything he believed. And still he couldn't breathe because the woman who had been his anchor and his undoing was here but unreachable, her stillness more painful than her absence had ever been. And then Lily's tear-streaked face turned up to him, her voice no louder than a prayer yet weighted with unshakable certainty. "Daddy, I told you. It's her. Mommy's here." And those words, spoken with the faith only a child could hold, crushed him deeper than any boardroom defeat. Because she was. Had clung to hope while he had buried it, she had believed while he had surrendered, and now her belief stood vindicated. And Lucas, a man who once measured life in victories and losses, realized this was a battle he had never truly fought, his body trembling as he finally lowered his hand toward Naomi's skin, pausing at the last instant when fear coiled inside him. Fear that her warmth might be gone, fear that if he touched her she might vanish like a mirage, and he closed his eyes against the storm, whispering again, "Naomi, can you hear me?" But before his fingers could close the distance, the door creaked open, and the soft shuffle of shoes entered the room, breaking the fragile silence. A nurse with weary eyes and a clipboard stepped inside, her presence cutting through the moment like a blade, her gaze flicking between the little girl clinging to her mother and the man who stood shattered beside the bed. And when she spoke, her words were careful, almost reluctant, yet every syllable dripped with a weight that promised to wound. "Mr. Carter, there is something you need to know." And the tremor in her voice told Lucas that the truth she carried was not the balm he craved but a revelation sharp enough to carve open scars he thought had long since healed, a truth poised to shatter him all over again. The nurse's revelation slices through Lucas's fragile hope, hinting that Naomi's return carries a secret more devastating than her disappearance. The room seemed to shrink around Lucas as the nurse's words echoed like a cruel verdict against his very existence, every syllable slicing through the armor he had built over years of burying the past. And though his body was seated on the hard hospital chair, his soul felt as if it had dropped into a bottomless pit of regret, a torment he could neither escape nor undo, because the reality staring back at him was unbearable. Naomi, the woman he once vowed to protect, had been breathing, suffering, existing only a few miles from the empire he had built, and yet he had walked the earth believing she was nothing more than ashes of memory. His eyes darted to her pale face, so still, so fragile, her lashes trembling faintly as if in some eternal dream, and he wanted to scream at the universe for being so merciless, for hiding her in plain sight while he drowned himself in work, in ambition, in hollow victories that meant nothing now. His chest heaved with ragged breaths as he buried his face into his trembling hands, whispering words only his guilt could understand. "Naomi. I should have searched every street, every hospital, every corner of this cursed city. I should have never given up." His voice cracked as if confessing to a judge, and the silence that followed was only broken by the steady beep of machines keeping her tethered to life. Lily, with her little yellow dress crumpled from sitting too long, edged closer, her small fingers wrapping around her father's sleeve as though grounding him in reality, and her voice, innocent, fragile, yet unbearably piercing, cut into him deeper than any accusation could. "Daddy, why did you tell me she was gone? If she wasn't?" Her eyes, wide and glistening, held not anger but confusion, a child's confusion at the cracks in the world adults build, and Lucas's lips parted but no sound came, for how could he explain to his daughter that the truth he gave her was a lie crafted from despair, that he had built a false history because it hurt too much to live with unanswered questions? He turned toward her, wanting to gather her into his arms, but the weight of her question pinned him to the chair, silenced him in a way no courtroom, no boardroom, no rival ever could, and in his silence, his failure became the answer. The nurse, oblivious to the storm raging inside father and daughter, adjusted Naomi's IV line, her voice softer now, almost apologetic, as if she too felt complicit in the crime of years lost. She arrived unconscious, no name, no identification, just broken bones and head trauma. We did everything to keep her alive, but without a family to claim her. She trailed off, her eyes flicking to Lucas, and he could see the unspoken judgment there. Where were you when she needed you? He wanted to rage at the nurse, at fate, at himself, but his energy had been drained by the gravity of what lay before him. Slowly, as if drawn by an invisible force, he reached out his hand toward Naomi's still fingers, hovering just above them, terrified that the simple act of touch might confirm this was nothing but a cruel illusion, yet aching to feel that she was real. His fingertips finally brushed against hers, cool and delicate, and the contact sent a jolt through him, a spark of both grief and desperate hope, and tears he had long buried welled hot in his eyes. "I'm here now," he whispered, though the words sounded weak, pathetic, almost mocking to the years of absence that could never be erased, and the silence that followed stretched unbearably long, filled only by the mechanical rhythm of machines that felt like mockery against his pounding heart. Lily climbed onto the chair beside him, her small hand resting over his larger one, and together they held Naomi's hand as though anchoring her to them, as though sheer will could undo time and pain. For the first time in years, Lucas allowed the fortress around him to crumble, his tears spilling freely, his voice shaking as he whispered broken promises to the unconscious woman who had once been the light of his life. "I should have fought harder. I should have never stopped looking. Forgive me, Naomi, forgive me." The nurse gave him a sympathetic glance before leaving them alone, closing the door quietly behind her, and the silence returned, thick, suffocating, unbearable. Lucas leaned closer to Naomi, his forehead nearly touching hers, his breath uneven as he whispered, "If you can hear me, please come back. I don't deserve it, but Lily, she needs her mother." For a moment, nothing happened, and despair curled tighter around his chest, but then, a flicker, Naomi's finger, so slight it might have been imagined, twitched beneath his palm, and Lucas froze, his breath caught in his throat, his eyes widening as if he had just seen the impossible. Lily gasped beside him, her little voice breaking the silence. "Daddy, did you see that?" Lucas's heart thundered so loudly he thought the machines might record it, and his world shifted again, for in that single twitch was the promise of a truth that could unravel everything, the sign that Naomi was not just surviving, but perhaps fighting her way back. Naomi's finger twitches again, more deliberate this time, leaving Lucas and Lily staring in stunned silence. Was this the beginning of a miracle, or a cruel trick of hope? Lucas's breath caught in his throat as Naomi's fingers shifted once more beneath his trembling palm, the tiniest movement yet powerful enough to crack the walls around his hardened heart, and he leaned forward desperately, his voice a broken whisper carried on the weight of years lost. "Naomi, can you hear me? It's me. It's Lucas. I'm here now, I swear I'll never leave again." His words trembled through the sterile air, but before hope could take root, the nurse, her tone clinical but not unkind, shook her head and reminded him in the flat cadence of experience. "It's just a reflex, sir, nothing more. The body sometimes moves without consciousness." The statement landed like a hammer against his fragile hope, but Lucas's jaw tightened, his blue eyes burning with defiance as he shot back, almost pleading more with fate than with her. "No, no, that was her. She's fighting, I know it." The nurse's silence was an answer of its own, and as she quietly left the room, Lucas's hand clung stubbornly to Naomi's, as though sheer touch could anchor her to the world she had been locked away from for 6 agonizing years. The night descended heavy and endless, the quiet hum of machines filling the void, and Lucas refused to move from the chair beside her, his tall frame slumped yet unyielding, his heart bleeding out through whispered words he had long sealed away. He bent close to her ear, confessing into the silence, "I'm sorry. For letting you slip away. For burying myself in work when I should have been searching every corner of this city for you. I was a coward, Naomi, and you paid the price for my weakness." His voice cracked, and tears he had sworn would never again fall stained his cheeks, hot and relentless, while his other hand gently brushed a strand of golden hair from her face, the simple act making him feel both whole and shattered. "I loved you then, I love you still, and if you open your eyes, I swear I'll spend the rest of my life proving it," he murmured, every word a vow forged from regret and longing. Meanwhile, Lily, her little body curled against his side in her wrinkled yellow dress, looked up at him with wide, tearful eyes, her innocence both a comfort and a blade, and her tiny voice, quivering yet steady with childlike faith, slipped into the fragile quiet. "She'll hear us, Daddy. I know she will." Mommy always listened, even when she pretended she didn't. Lucas tightened his arm around her, his lips pressed to the crown of her soft hair, and though his throat was too choked to respond, his heart whispered gratitude to the child who carried more hope than he had strength to muster. The hours dragged on, the clock hands crawling, the sterile smell of antiseptic growing sharper with fatigue, and still Lucas refused to close his eyes, refusing to miss even a flicker of change, as if his sheer will could coax her back from the abyss. Yet somewhere in the depth of his despair, when Lily's breathing softened into the fragile rhythm of sleep against his chest, Lucas closed his eyes too, not to rest, but to pray, a prayer that shook his soul because it was the first he had allowed himself in years. "God," he whispered into the darkness, his voice raw and halting, "I don't know if you even listen to men like me anymore, but if you do, don't. Do this for me, do it for her, for Lily. Give them back to each other, and I'll spend whatever's left of me making it right." His fingers clenched tighter around Naomi's delicate hand, his thumb tracing over the veins as though memorizing them, while silence weighed heavy in the room, thick with unspoken fears and desperate longing. Outside the window, dawn crept in slowly, painting the horizon with a grayish light that felt both cruel and promising, and the change in the air made Lucas stir, lifting his weary head as the door creaked open. A man in a white coat entered, his face lined with fatigue but his eyes sharp, carrying the weight of knowledge Lucas both longed for and dreaded, and as he checked Naomi's chart and adjusted the monitor, the stillness seemed to hum with anticipation. Lucas straightened, his spine rigid, his heart hammering as if bracing for a blow, and Lily stirred awake, rubbing her eyes and clutching her father's sleeve. The doctor sighed, looked directly at Lucas, and spoke with a gravity that turned the blood in his veins to ice. "Mr. Carter, there's something you need to know about the night of her accident." The doctor's voice drops, revealing a shocking detail that will change everything Lucas thought he knew about Naomi's disappearance. The doctor's words seemed to echo in the sterile air, cutting into Lucas with a sharpness no scalpel could rival, each syllable detonating inside him until the very foundation of what he thought he knew began to crack apart, and he sat frozen in the chair, staring blankly at Naomi's motionless body as though she might rise and explain herself, explain everything, because the truth he had just heard was unbearable. She had not been alone in that car, another man had been with her, and that man had not survived. Lucas's jaw clenched, his breath ragged, his mind caught between disbelief and a storm of ugly questions that flooded him like poison. Who was he? Why was she with him? What happened that night she disappeared from his world? The image of Naomi, the woman he adored, sitting in a car beside another man felt like betrayal, and yet the woman lying before him, broken and pale, seemed incapable of deceit, leaving him twisted in a cruel paradox of love and suspicion. His chest heaved as he whispered, almost afraid of the answer, "Naomi, why? What secrets did you keep from me?" His voice trembled, laced with a pain deeper than rage, because beneath the jealousy and fear was the unbearable thought that maybe he hadn't truly known her at all, that maybe the years they shared had been threaded with shadows he had been blind to see. He stood suddenly, pacing at the foot of the bed, his hands gripping his hair, his thoughts a whirlwind that refused to settle, while Lily sat quietly by Naomi's side, her little fingers laced around her mother's cold hand, her wide eyes following her father's storm with a mixture of fear and determination beyond her years. "Daddy," she said softly, her voice cracking but clear, "don't be angry. She needs us. That's all that matters." Lucas stopped mid-step, her words hitting harder than the doctor's revelation, because they were simple, pure, and true, in a way his complicated mind wanted to resist. He turned back to them, his tall frame trembling, his eyes burning with unshed tears as he watched his daughter holding on to hope like a lifeline, and for a fleeting moment the fury drained, replaced by crushing guilt that his first instinct had been suspicion rather than compassion. He knelt beside Lily, placing a hand on her small shoulder, his voice hoarse as he admitted, "You're right, she needs us more than ever. I won't fail her again. I promise you that. Yet even as he said the words, doubt slithered in the corners of his mind, whispering that promises meant nothing if the past held truths sharp enough to shatter them. The doctor, having done his duty, quietly excused himself, leaving behind a silence heavy with secrets and the steady hum of machinery that seemed suddenly louder, almost taunting. Lucas sat again, burying his face into Naomi's motionless hand, his lips brushing her knuckles as he whispered apologies mixed with desperate pleas, while his other hand trembled over his chest, as though trying to still the chaos raging within him. The hours stretched mercilessly, shadows lengthening across the walls, the weight of night pressing down on his weary shoulders, and still he sat vigilant, unwilling to leave even as exhaustion clawed at his body. Lily drifted into sleep curled against the chair, her head resting against his arm, her soft breathing a fragile anchor that kept him from sinking entirely into despair, and Lucas stroked her hair absently, his gaze fixed on Naomi's still face, searching for any sign, any flicker, any proof that the love he had lost was still tethered to him in some invisible way. Time dragged until the world outside dissolved into silence, and the sterile glow of the monitors became the only stars in his darkness. But just as his eyes began to droop with fatigue, the piercing sound of a sudden spike shattered the stillness. The heart monitor shrieked with a rhythm it had not shown before, sharp and frantic, pulling him violently to his feet. Lucas's heart lurched, adrenaline flooding his veins as he gripped Naomi's hand tighter, his voice breaking into the night. "Naomi, stay with us. Please, stay with us." Lily jolted awake, her frightened eyes darting from the machine to her mother, and in that moment, the fragile thread holding their world together threatened to snap. The monitor's beeping grows louder and more erratic, forcing Lucas to slam the emergency button as doctors rush in. Was Naomi fighting her way back, or was her body giving up? The shrill alarms shattered the night's fragile stillness, a sound so violent it felt like it tore open the very walls of Lucas's chest, and in an instant the room erupted into chaos as nurses flooded through the door, their urgent commands colliding with the mechanical beeping that screamed. Naomi's body was caught in a war between staying and slipping away, and Lucas, the man who once commanded boardrooms with a glance, now found himself reduced to nothing but raw terror, clutching Naomi's limp hand with both of his, as though his touch alone could tether her soul to the world. "Stay with me, Naomi, please, stay!" he cried, his voice breaking, shattering the image of a man who once prided himself on control, and beside him, Lily's sobs tore through the air, her little body shaking violently as she buried her face against his chest, clinging to him as if he could shield her from losing everything. Lucas wrapped one trembling arm around his daughter while his other hand refused to release Naomi, his knuckles white with desperation, and as the nurses moved with trained urgency, checking vitals, adjusting wires, calling codes into the hallway, he realized with crushing clarity how powerless he truly was, how hollow his wealth and power felt against the terrifying fragility of a single heartbeat. The empire he had built, the towers that bore his name, the millions he hoarded, all of it was useless here, in this room where love and life were the only currencies that mattered, and he felt stripped bare, like a man who had spent his life building fortresses only to find himself standing defenseless in the one battle that truly counted. His eyes darted between Naomi's pale face and the monitors, praying with every uneven breath that the lines would steady, that her chest would rise again, and when at last the machines began to calm, their frantic shrieking softening into steadier rhythms, Lucas felt his own lungs release the breath he didn't realize he had been holding, tears streaking his cheeks unchecked. Naomi's chest lifted faintly, weak but undeniable. A rise and fall so precious it felt like a miracle, and Lucas bent over her, his forehead pressing gently to hers as though he could fuse his strength into her fragile body. His words spilled out like a vow carved from the deepest chambers of his soul, his voice hoarse yet burning with sincerity. "If you wake up, I swear, I'll never let you go again. No lies, no distance, no silence, just us, just our family." Lily lifted her head, her tear-streaked face watching the two of them with wide, trembling hope, and she whispered in her small, fragile voice, "Mommy, please come back to us. We're waiting." The silence that followed was unbearable, the kind of silence that held the weight of 1,000 unanswered prayers, until suddenly, impossibly, Naomi's lips parted ever so slightly, a faint tremor brushing against the stillness of the room, as though the first word of her return hovered on her breath. Lucas freezes, staring in disbelief as Naomi's lips quiver again. Was she about to speak, or was it just another cruel trick of fate? The room froze as though time itself had stopped, the monitors humming in quiet rhythm, their green lines tracing fragile life on a glowing screen, and Lucas leaned closer, his trembling fingers brushing the side of Naomi's face, whispering, "Naomi, say something, please. Anything." His voice breaking with the weight of years lost and love buried under pride, and her lips trembled, not in strength but in fragile weakness, the faintest breath escaping like a ghost breaking through silence, and Lily gasped, clutching tighter at her mother's hand, her wide innocent eyes filled with hope, crying, "See, Daddy? She heard you. She wants to come back to us." And those words, so pure, so full of unwavering faith, pierced through Lucas's chest like sunlight forcing its way into a room long darkened, and tears streamed freely down his face, not the tears of a powerful man, but of a broken husband, of a father desperate for redemption, and in that suspended moment he was no longer the ruthless CEO who ruled over skyscrapers and empires, but just a man stripped to his soul, begging silently for mercy, begging for the chance to rewrite his mistakes, his forehead resting against Naomi's as the steady rhythm of the machines filled the space between life and death, and Lily's tiny fingers overlapped theirs, bridging a bond that pain had tried to sever, whispering in her childish sincerity, "Mommy, don't leave me. I need you. I prayed for you every night. Please don't go." And Lucas's heart shattered at the sound, at the thought of his little girl knowing prayers more than lullabies, loss more than laughter, and with a voice heavy with everything he could never buy with wealth, he choked out, "Naomi, I wasted 6 years chasing a world that meant nothing without you. I let pride blind me, I let fear keep me from holding on, but if you wake up, if you come back, I swear before God and before our daughter, I'll never let you go again. I'll never fail you again." And silence swallowed his vow, but in that silence there was a flicker, Naomi's eyelids quivering as though battling chains unseen, her lips parting once more, forming no sound but carrying the unbearable tension of words unsaid, and Lucas, his soul trembling, swore he heard her, swore he felt the faintest whisper of hope crossing the space between them, and Lily cried out joyfully, "Daddy, she's trying, Mommy's trying," her voice breaking but filled with fierce belief, and Lucas clung to that belief like a drowning man to a lifeline, clutching Naomi's hand against his chest, his tears falling over her knuckles, whispering again and again, "Come back to us, Naomi, come back, I can't lose you, not now, not ever again." And the monitors beeped steadily, each sound echoing the fragile thread of life that refused to let go, until at last the camera of fate pulled closer, closer to Naomi's pale, unmoving face, closer to lips that seemed ready to shape a word yet remained sealed in the haunting stillness between life and eternity. And as the screen faded into quiet darkness, the unanswered question lingered like a wound left open. Would Naomi fight her way back to the family waiting, or would her final whisper be carried away forever?